There we go. So, welcome everybody. So, we are so excited because we are doing this tonight with one of our great partners, Rachel Green with the Women of Color Coalition. We have been working with Rachel for years now, and we love it when she collaborates with this. The Women of Color Coalition is a grassroots political organization dedicated to building the power of Black, Indigenous women and communities of color while supporting candidates and elected officials who best reflect our progressive policy mission and values. And Rachel is the founder and CEO of the Women of Color Coalition. Throughout her career, she has been a staunch advocate for educational equality, civil rights, and social justice, particularly for children in New Jersey. And she is going to be having a wonderful conversation tonight with Congressman Lauren Underwood. Congressman Underwood serves the Illinois' 14th congressional district, and she was the first, I believe you were the first woman of color to serve in this position. But she was originally sworn in January of 2019. And she is the first woman of color and the first millennial to represent her community in Congress. And I apologize for the tell. My cats always join. She is also the co-founder and co-chair of the Black Maternal Health Caucus, addressing America's Black maternal health crisis in Congress, and advances policies and solutions to improve maternal health outcomes. So Rachel, Lauren, take it away.
Well, thank you so much. A special thank you to Leah, Nick, and Jamie for having me on this evening. I look forward to having this wonderful, wonderful discussion with Congresswoman Underwood. It is a distinct pleasure to be able to have this dialogue with you this evening. So with that being said, Congresswoman Underwood, here's your first question this evening. What are the top 3 issues that you believe Democrats should be prioritizing right now to effectively counter the Republican agenda and advance our values as a nation?
Rachel, thank you for having me. Hi, everybody. Hope you all are taking good care of yourselves. I think we have to just acknowledge that everything is terrible right now, and I'm not here to convince you otherwise. So let's just start there. I think that in this moment, we have to remember that we can do multiple things at once. We can engage with our Democratic base, those folks who are so upset, angry, frustrated, disillusioned with politics, those folks who might have been feeling left out or forgotten, and also make sure that we are talking from those folks who are in the middle, those swing voters, those people who aren't quite happy with what's going on because Trump isn't delivering as promised, and they're looking around to see who else has some ideas. And there are, I believe, a few issue areas that allow us to kind of touch both in an authentic, true way. I think number one is the economy. That is where Donald Trump is the weakest right now. It's what's dragging down his approval ratings between the tariffs and what Hakeem Jeffries is calling a soon-to-be Republican recession. I think that we have a great opportunity to talk to people about our plan to lower costs for hardworking families in our country. This week, House Democrats are in the middle of Lowering Costs Week of Action. And so we're all having town halls and engagements across our congressional districts talking about this very topic, the ways that we can lower healthcare costs, the ways that we can lower housing costs, the agenda that we have, an affirmative agenda to help American families, while Donald Trump is picking fights with our allies and really taking actions that further isolate America from the world stage. So that's number one. I think number two, in terms of current events, we know that people are very animated around this discussion of the rule of law, our democracy, a constitutional crisis, attack on the Constitution, that line of discussion. The due process, someone put in the chat, yes, all of these rights that we have as Americans, the attack on free speech, and the way that people are really being aggressively targeted, illegally targeted by Donald Trump and his administration. And I think that that's a conversation that we can't walk past, because if we walk past it, people think we're behaving as business as usual. Do I think that this is going to be the number one poll tested issue for the midterm elections? I do not. But we are in a moment of emergency. Times are not normal, things are not okay. And I think that we have to really acknowledge that for people when we're talking with them, and make sure that we're meeting the moment. The last thing I will say is healthcare. What Robert Kennedy is doing to actively destroy our public health infrastructure, trust in science, and to make sure that people understand that it doesn't have to be this way. The Trump folks have this air of inevitability, right? Like, why don't you all just yield now because we're going to get our way eventually? And we see people um, capitulating. And we see this happening so clearly in healthcare, where, they make one statement calling into question the safety of vaccines. And then all of a sudden you see these agencies, right, not supporting screening, not, issuing guidance about epidemics, all these different, it's just really dangerous, and more people are going to die. And so I think on the healthcare conversation, we have to talk about, vaccines are safe and effective, and also our efforts to lower healthcare costs for the American people, right? We can have both conversations underneath that healthcare umbrella. And that's really, between those three, I've been having a lot of conversations with people in my district, and that's what I'm hearing about most frequently.
Wonderful. And do you believe folks reaching out to your office, reaching out to your colleague's office, is that you feel one of the most effective ways for folks to have their voice heard, and really for you and your colleagues to know what's happening on the ground and how they can help get the message to you?
Okay, so I think that we as members of Congress should be going to find people where they are gathering. And so if it's in person, you see a lot of members of Congress, for example, spending time at like senior centers, right? Because the seniors are there and they want to talk. Well, we need to do the same thing online. So I serve in House Democratic leadership, working on messaging and communications. And one of my big projects is helping House Democrats be better online. That means showing up on all the platforms where people are gathered, and then creating content, so that if someone is looking for us, they can find us. They can find the information that they need, and they can hear us being responsive to what's going on. And so I believe that, yes, reaching out to our office, making that phone call, stopping by a district office, if we're having town halls or other public events, attending those things and engaging in a conversation is really important. Do not discount the power of asking for a meeting. I meet with constituents
Mm.
all the time. We call them office hours. And people bring all types of issues that they want to discuss, but it's just a chance for a one-on-one dialogue that might be a little bit more in depth than what you might get in a quick exchange at a town hall meeting. But I think that there's also got to be opportunities for online engagement. Now, when you are asking someone to co-sponsor a bill or to vote a certain way, sending a DM or leaving a comment may not be the best way to engage, but I do think that engagement online is very important. And so some members have been doing more lives. I don't know if you've seen, but in the caucus, we launched something called the WTF show, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday show. Have you seen it?
No,
Every Wednesday, Thursday,
no.
Friday, during the first
Huh.
100 days of the Trump administration, House Democrats have been going live, talking about all the things. And so I just did one this past Friday with Leader Jeffries. I've done probably 4 or 5 of them since the Trump administration has started. But this is a chance when you obviously are live on Instagram, there's a dialogue and you can see those comments and be responsive. That's just an example of opportunities for digital engagement and conversation, so that everyone who's not going to show up at an in-person event can still have that touch point with their representative. I say all that to say I'm someone who wants to be engaged, Now, there's a whole category of Republican members who are hiding. They are running away from their representatives. And if you live in one of those districts, I think that we have to be more creative in making sure that our voices are heard. If you didn't know about the WTF show, you can find us on Instagram,
You're
the
reading my mind, Congresswoman. That was what I
WT
was going to ask next.
show.
Please, somebody drop that link in the chat for us.
Yeah. We'll put it in the chat before I leave today. But it's the WTF Show 2025 is our
Awesome.
handle. And you can see all of them, or many of them, from the first 100 days.
Oh, wonderful. I can't wait to watch now. It's going to be my new thing. My new thing. I always binge watch certain things on the weekend, so it's going to be my new one.
Yeah.
Next question for you. As Big Tent, as a Big Tent party, how do you think we can best unite Democrats around a shared vision of the future, despite our diverse perspectives and priorities? That's a good question right there, because I think as organizers, we all wonder that as well.
I think it's really important that we talk about shared values. I think shared values is the way that we connect, because when you can have a conversation around values using common language, then we can start sharing stories and narrative, and then people start feeling included and involved and seen. And then those barriers, so to speak, or those differences become less prominent because we've already established community with one another. And so I think that some of the siloing that happens when we discuss like a fixed policy position really misses those areas where we actually agree. And so when I say shared values, an example, healthcare is a human right. And we should be able to all meet there and have a conversation around how everybody should be able to have high quality, world class, healthcare without disparities, that's affordable and all these different things, right? But if we start out a conversation like, insulin should be free, which I believe it should, but sometimes people just are like, wait, I wasn't ready for that, and they run to their corner and they get dug in. And so that's how I approach conversations in my congressional district. As you know, we flipped a seat in 2018, and it's been competitive since that time. And a shared values approach really allows us to tackle some of the thorniest issues, reproductive freedom, the climate crisis. It's enabled us to tackle issues relating to foreign affairs. Let us, sort of immigration, safety and security, right? When we talk about shared values, we're able to have a solid foundation for an actual discussion, not a debate, not calling out, not accountability, not all those things, but just an opportunity for dialogue.
I love it. I love it. It just reminds me of what we used to do. We used to be able to sit on our deck or get around the kitchen table and have these conversations. And you might not always agree with each other, but at least you're talking to each other. And eventually you might come to a common ground or a place of understanding. But if you're only just barking at each other and we never have this actual real conversation and hear each other, which I think is a lot of what's going on right now, we just are not listening to each other and hearing each other. So thank you so much for that.
Can I also say something though?
Yes, please do.
Some of the perceived disagreement is around tactics.
Mm.
And sometimes we really are on the same page about policy. But sometimes people, it's like this fight harder kind of refrain.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of it might be personality differences. Some of it might be, folks are looking to see one very specific thing. Like my example on the fight harder is some people are like, I haven't seen you get arrested. And I'm like, ma'am, that is not everybody's ministry, but it doesn't mean that
Right.
it's not working. You know what I'm saying? Like there's some people who will be there with you and have the bail fund on speed dial. And then there are others of us where that's just not quite our ministry, and that's okay. But it doesn't mean that we're not showing up, meeting the moment, and that we don't share values and recognizing, what's going on or the urgency. And so I do think that particularly as advocates and activists and those who care very deeply and are involved in doing the work of saving our democracy, we have to also just be cognizant on when sometimes there's a tactical difference and when there is a values difference. Because I believe most times the disagreements are often tactical.
deep. That's deep right there. That's a whole episode in itself. Um,
Yes.
okay. So next, how do you suggest we balance opposing President Trump's policy with communicating our own positive vision for our country's future? In other words, how can we effectively critique his agenda while also showcasing our own alternative?
I think storytelling lets you do all those things.
Mm,
And I think, we've gotten away from that narrative work that is so powerful and important. Um, and, you know, I think organizations and our democratic infrastructure would be well served to do just like to devote some sessions to narrative and encouraging people to build their own story, write their story or share their story, refine that story, because that story can take you to the doors when you're out knocking during that phase of a campaign. That story can take you um, into rallies if you're speaking at the mic and you're, getting that crowd fired up. That story can take you to the Congress if you're a witness or if you're in a meeting with a policymaker, right? Like that story can take you a lot of places. And it allows you to connect with folks across the ideologic spectrum, right? Like right now, this phase of where we're at in the cycle is not really an active campaign phase, right? Like I'm not showing up asking for folks' votes right now. I'm
right.
showing up doing my job and I'm making sure that people understand what we're doing in Washington. But it doesn't have to feel transactional if we're grounding the discussion in narrative and storytelling. I think it's just something that's often overlooked. Um, and I think it's really essential to effective communications.
Oh, I totally agree. There's been so many times that the passion that gets behind a particular issue or a narrative, once someone tells their story, it clicks for folks.
Yes.
Before they were kind of ambiguous, like, oh, yeah, well, yeah, they're talking about this, gas or eggs or whatever. But until you actually go to the store and you go purchase those eggs, you're like, whoa, wait a minute. Now I'm on social media saying how I just paid $35 for, well, actually, I'm buying a few dozen. So it's not like I'm buying one dozen for
Yeah.
$35, but I'm getting a few dozen because, I'm trying to be, frugal with my funds. But yeah, once you actually get on and talk with someone else and tell your story and everyone gets to chit chatting, it's definitely a narrative that grows some legs, kind of like our utilities here in New Jersey have become quite astronomical. So that's
Mhm.
the new thing that we're all worried about here. Well, Jamie, do we have time for maybe a couple questions from the audience that maybe we can have them put it in the chat?
Yeah, I did disable. I guess it depends on the Congresswoman's time.
Oh,
So,
absolutely, Congresswoman. My apologies.
Sure. I'm
Yes.
happy
How's
to
your
take a
time?
couple questions. It's no problem.
Okay.
so if you have a question, please put them in chat.
Okay, looks like we have from Melanie Thomas. What are your thoughts about pending Medicaid cuts, and what do you plan to do about it? Well, you and your colleagues, because it's going to take all you guys to make this thing happen.
Sure. So the Medicaid cuts that are being threatened are really going to come into sharp focus in May. It is go time. And so let's talk about what the Medicaid program is first. So Medicaid is healthcare coverage for low-income Americans. In states like mine, it's not called like Medicaid. It's called, Molina or
Mm,
Centene or like whatever the name of the health insurance company that
mhm,
administers the Medicaid program. So there's a lot of people, millions of people in this country don't know that their healthcare is going to be threatened because they don't have a card that says Medicaid. Let's just start
mhm,
there. Um, they are threatening to cut $880 billion through a process called reconciliation. We will not be voting for it. So that's number one. What are we doing? We are not voting for the bill. Number two, we are very actively working to make sure the American people understand exactly how Republicans are planning to cut their health care. Last week, we had a Medicaid Day of Action, right? Where
Mhm.
members were all across their districts going to community health centers, going to nursing homes, visiting with school-age kids, and talking with their communities about this essential healthcare and why it's at risk. This pressure is working. For those of you who have been making calls, calling into Republican offices, I'm like, pick a Republican. Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter if it's your representative. They're never going to call you back anyways. So just call them. Call them, tell your storytelling, and make sure they understand why we need to protect this essential healthcare. If that Republican is having town halls, go to the town hall and talk to them about Medicaid, right? This pressure is causing some of the Republicans in the swing districts to write these letters to the speaker talking about how worried and concerned they are. They're using the Susan Collins language about, oh, I'm so concerned, right? They're doing that. But that's the first sign, right? That the pressure is working because we need to get them to a spot where they know that they will lose their election if they vote for this bill. And I believe we are very close
Mm.
because we don't need half of the House Republicans to vote no. We need less than half a dozen, less than six of them to tell the speaker, not going to happen if you do this. That right there is how we protect Medicaid.
I love it.
So it's through advocacy. And we have to do this in partnership. It's not something members can do on our own. We have to do it with advocates and activists in our communities. We have to do it with people who need that nursing home to stay open, folks who need that memory care, people who need their healthcare coverage, their kids need their healthcare, pregnant women, all that's whose voices are so powerful in this conversation. And the storytelling that I was talking about earlier is essential.
Wow. Well, I think I'm going to leave it right here because I think now, everyone, you have your marching orders. We know that it's working. Now we know this. It's working. Write the letters. Get out in front of your congressman or woman's office and let them know what you're thinking. Oh, and the phone up. You heard that, secret squirrel. The phone calls really work as well. So it's putting a little pressure there. Now, it sounds like a lot of pressure if they're writing letters to the speaker. So we know what's working for you now. So that being said, Congresswoman, thank you so much.
Thank you.
We so appreciate you this evening. What wonderful nuggets of knowledge you dropped for us this evening. And I'm going to turn the mic over back to Jamie and Nick. And thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate you.
Here now.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Nick.
Rachel, that was fantastic. Thank you so much.
And, guys, always, it's a pleasure to always work with you all. I love it, love it, love it. Anytime you need me, just give me a ring-a-ding.
Absolutely. We always do. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
So as we sort of turn to the second half of the program here, I'm very excited to welcome our next guest. You all know him as a former congressman from North Carolina who fought tooth and nail for North Carolinians in Congress, from reproductive rights to healthcare and all points in between, and not to mention voting rights, and did such a great job that the North Carolina Republican Party figured out a way to gerrymander him out of his district only a year after he flipped that seat from red to blue in 2022. He is, but he's not done yet. He's a father and a fighter and a husband and but longtime public servant, and we're so excited to have Wiley Nickel here because he just announced that he's running for U.S. Senate in North Carolina. So, Wiley, thanks for joining the Demcast Democracy Briefing tonight. Great to have you.
Nick, thank you so much. I can't tell you how excited I am to be with you. And I've told you this before, but to have so many folks with Demcast on here, I have to say it again. The work you did to help uplift my campaign when we flipped one of just 6 Republican seats from red to blue was a huge deal. You did this one, tweet where you said, this guy, he can win this race. It's going to be close. He's only got a few thousand followers. And then boom, I had this huge growth of followers because of you and because of Demcast, because of every single person here who amplified my campaign, and it made a huge deal. We beat a far-right extremist that Trump backed, and when he said that he thought, when Donald Trump said the U.S. was a banana republic, and my opponent said he thought he was talking about the clothing store in the mall, we amplified that to millions of people. And then when he said that women who were the victims of rape should have to go before a panel of politicians to decide if they get health care, we were able to uplift that to millions of people. So the work you did literally was a huge turning point for my campaign for Congress. I flipped a Republican seat thanks to your work. And so I just want to thank everybody here because it really made a difference and mattered in North Carolina's 13th district.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for saying that. And folks, just listen to what he just said. Look, a lot of people downplay the impact that a social media strategy and digital army like ours can have on politics. But here's somebody who won saying that our work directly contributed to his win, and I just want everybody to sort of internalize that and understand that this is really important work that we do as a community. So thank you, Wiley, for saying that. And now, tell us about your run for Senate. Take that. How'd you make that decision? What are you hoping to accomplish? Who's your opponent? All these things, and then we'll go back to the topic of sort of messaging and sort of pick up on some of the threads that Congresswoman Underwood was talking about.
Thanks so much, Nick. Listen, I am angry. I'm mad. We've got a president in the Oval Office shredding the Constitution. We've got a president deliberately tanking our economy. Your 401ks, they're about to be 104ks. We've got an unelected billionaire wreaking havoc throughout the federal government, destroying programs that so many of us rely on. And who do we have to thank for all of this? First and foremost, in the U.S. Senate, Tom Tillis, the most vulnerable Republican in the Senate. In North Carolina, we know he says one thing and does another. And we know that when the chips are down, Tom Tillis lays down every single time for Donald Trump, for Elon Musk, for policies that are absolutely horrible. He was literally the deciding vote for Pete Hegseth to be Secretary of Defense. He went and he said, all right, this guy's horrible. I'm not going to vote for him. And then he folded under pressure to Trump and Elon Musk. And now we've got this walking national security disaster. He said he was against Trump's tariffs, but then he voted for Trump's tariffs. He's never gotten over 49% in the 2 elections he won. Incredibly vulnerable here. This is a seat we got to flip, and I'm so passionate about doing just that. But for me, this was just not a time to sit on the sidelines. We got to get out there. We got to run for office, across the country, especially in these kind of races. And I know how to win tough races. As you know, I've done it once. I'll do it again. We flipped one of just 6 Republican seats from red to blue back in 2022. And now we're primed to do it again. So for the folks out there, if you are angry and you're as mad as I am, this is a race where it's going to be incredibly close. Your time, your effort will make a difference. My staff's going to drop all of my links in there, but it's wileynickel.com. I hope you will check out our campaign and get behind us, because this is one that is going to be really close. And the effort, the advocacy, it's done it once. It's going to do it again.
I will say there is 100% no path to retaking the Senate in 2026 without Democrats flipping the seat in North Carolina. So it is a really important seat. So as you're going out there, I imagine you've started to kind of hit the road a little bit. What are you talking about with North Carolinians? Like, is it the question that was asked of Congresswoman Underwood, like, what's that balance of like anti-Tillis versus like pro, a vision that is different from what the MAGA brand offers to people?
Yeah, no. We're talking about economic issues. We're talking about kitchen table issues. And I think the voters, were pretty straightforward with what they wanted in this last election. They wanted, folks who are going to tackle inflation and help bring down costs. And so what has Donald Trump done immediately? He's got $2.5 trillion that he's given away to billionaires. That's going to cause inflation to go up. And he's got these tariffs that are a $4,000 tax on working families. That's going to cause costs to go up considerably. So they are just handing this issue to us, and we've got to just beat them over the head with it because it is bad for middle-class families in North Carolina. These policies are incredibly bad. And why are they doing it? They're doing all of this to give trillions of dollars to billionaires like Elon Musk. The numbers don't lie. This is a tax plan designed for the very, very wealthy, and it screws working families.
Okay, so economics is clearly at the top of the list, and that feels very appropriate. What else is sort of are issues that are bubbling to the top of the sort of interests of North Carolina voters?
The tariffs, are a huge hit for North Carolina. We're very worried, and what we're seeing there, and we're focusing our attention on Tom Tillis for his role. I mean, one of the places that I think my campaign is really focusing, and as I've been going and doing these open chair town halls, so these Republican districts are really happy to have a Democrat come in and do a town hall, and we invite the Republican member of Congress, but of course they're never going to show up. So we have the empty chair, but really focusing on tariffs, how bad they'll be for North Carolina. That's been a huge issue. Showing up has been a big one, but people are concerned about our democracy and what they're seeing in Washington. So, for me, I think my takeaway, my big, aside from messaging, is just the energy out there. I mean, we're seeing huge turnouts, for incredibly early. People are fired up, and that's going to make a huge difference as we continue on through this election. And it's the thing that we got to do to hold Trump accountable right now too. He folds under pressure, and we got to apply that pressure. And there's no greater leverage for really literally anywhere in Congress than Tom Tillis. This is the most vulnerable Republican senator. And if you want to send Donald Trump a message, sending Tom Tillis packing sends a message that you can't spin that one. That's a message that he'll receive loud and clear when we beat him.
I can't interrupt because I saw a TikTok video you had done, so maybe a month or so ago. It was an interview. And one thing you said that has resonated with me, and I've seen a lot of comments in the thing, is Democrats need that positive vision of the future, not just fighting against Trump. So how do we portray this positive vision of the future?
Yeah, incredibly important. And I think any campaign, it can't just be against Trump. I mean, people are going to understand what's going on there, but we got to talk about how we're going to, uplift middle-class working families. So that means lower taxes, better pay. We have policies that will do so much there to help uplift people, to bring down the cost of healthcare, to bring down the cost of housing. That's what the folks that I represented in North Carolina wanted to talk about. They weren't, that interested in the daily, stuff that you're hearing, the chattering class talks about all the time in Washington. They just want to, be able to get affordable childcare for their kids. They want to be able to take their kids to Disney World, once a year. They want to be able to do that. And when the costs are high, when it's hard to make ends meet, they can't do that. So it's always the economy. We got to talk about that. And that, for me was what we saw as a winning message across the country. And in a state like North Carolina, where we won a ton of races, for Democrats statewide this last election too.
And I imagine that there are a lot of federal workers in the state of North Carolina, as there are in all states, and even just federally adjacent workers, like you mentioned when you came on our podcast about the research triangle and how much federal money kind of flows through there. Like, is that an area of focus for you?
Oh yeah, no. I mean, we're highlighting all of these places that Elon Musk is targeting and cutting. Specifically, like the one that I think of that I think a broad national audience can understand is, we have the largest research triangle park in the country, in the triangle. And one of the first tenants was the EPA. Right now, we have 1,200 people in this amazing campus. Most of them are just doing research, on clean air and clean water. Amazing folks. They're not political. They're not partisan. They're just trying to help, improve the air we breathe and the water we drink. And we're looking at over half of that, that campus being slashed immediately with these cuts. That's going to make all of us less safe. That's just one example, and there are hundreds of them. We're hearing, people who are laying off their entire staff, their entire companies because of, what's happening with USAID. The list goes on, but this is bad for North Carolina. And I know it's bad for our country too. So, whenever we get a chance to uplift these stories and explain what's going on, we have to, because for a state like North Carolina, it's a big deal.
And for folks who are listening, if you have a question for Wiley, go ahead. And Jamie, is Q&A back up, or should people put their questions in the chat?
I can try to get Q&A back up while we're on.
I mean, either way, as long as you can track the chat for us so that we can field those questions. But yeah, everybody feel free to bring in questions. I do see some people sort of in the chat saying like, hey, everybody always says that we're, fighting for the middle class. What about the working class? What about the working poor? And even a comment that like, hey, if we keep on this current trajectory, there isn't going to be a middle class anymore. It's going to be all, it's going to be the 100% the haves and the have-nots. What kind of language do you use around talking about working people, and what have you found to be effective in North Carolina?
Yeah, I mean, I try to personalize this stuff as much as I can and start from that place of, a mutual understanding of where we are. When I was in Congress, I was part of the Congressional Dads Caucus. It's a great group where we talked about the role of dads, in families, and then we took that to public policy. So that allowed us to get into the kitchen table issues like paid family and medical leave, more access to affordable child care and the child tax credit, making that permanent. And then that gives us a chance to talk about how we can strengthen families. Then we get on to the next level. I think, specifically one place that I've been very passionate about is uplifting the middle class by supporting unions and collective bargaining. Incredibly important. The stats don't lie. It is a ticket to the middle class. It's a ticket to better pay, better benefits, safer working conditions. And we've seen when we have greater access, it lifts up all boats and increases the middle class. That's the strength of the United States of America. We have to have the main focus. My focus has always been how do we expand the middle class? And unfortunately, the policies that we have in Washington continue to favor corporations and the wealthy, and you just continue to see it over and over and over. And the sad reality is in Congress, it's really easy to do nothing. That's what they're good at. And it keeps the status quo there. So those are things that people should be angry about. They should be mad. And again, the numbers don't lie. We need to do much better to make corporations and the wealthy pay their fair share. I think that's a place that we can all agree to start, and then that takes us to the big policy issues that we continue to talk about.
And we talked a lot about what to say. What about how you say it? Like, obviously, you've got to do the retail campaigning. You got to go to all the community events and shake the hands and kiss the babies and all the things when you're a candidate for Senate statewide. But obviously, we're in the 21st century here, mid 2020s now. People consume information in different ways than they used to. Like, how are you going to leverage, present technology to try and reach more people who you can't just like go and shake hands with?
Yeah, I think social media is really important. You got to be your own messenger, be on every platform, and I hadn't really done Reddit before. I just learned about Reddit, and you get every avenue you can. But for me, the big place for Democrats that we need to do a lot better is building an ecosystem that supports, groups like Demcast, podcasts that put out good positive information. Really, the Republicans just have a lot more of that. So we need to focus our energy there because, a short tweet or a 15 or 30-second clip is one thing, but having a half hour, an hour conversation, so incredibly different in terms of getting dozens and dozens of things out there that matter and that help make your case for the voters. So expanding that ecosystem really important. Whenever I get an offer to go on podcasts like the Dangerous Ones or others, I'm excited. I take it because it allows me to get out there and find a different audience. And if we just stick with the way we've always done things, we're gonna get the same result. So we have to expand the playing field and get out there to places that maybe aren't quite as political. Maybe it's a podcast on bourbon tasting. I'm going to be doing one of those at one point. So you're reaching new people. I think that's one piece of the dozens of things we need to do.
If the bourbon tasting podcast is in person, if you've got a +1, let me know. That sounds fun. No, obviously that's music to my ears, and to the ears of a lot of the folks who are on this call, because we sort of occupy a unique space in the activism community, and really focus on driving the online message and even taking the clips from podcasts and progressive media and spreading those around to try and build that infrastructure. So that's good to hear. I'm gonna take advantage of all the invites you can get. I think that's a really smart strategy. Jamie, how are questions coming in the chat here?
There's one I'd love an update on. What's going on with the North Carolina Supreme Court race? Seems like every day there's a new ruling.
Yeah, no, for folks who don't know, there is one race in the entire country that hasn't been finished yet and confirmed, and that's our Supreme Court race. Allison Riggs won the race. 2 recounts have proven that she's won by a little over 700 votes. It's a close race, but she won. And what Republicans have done, they have a majority on the North Carolina Supreme Court, the body that this election is about, and they're trying to overturn an election. The Republican loser knows he's lost, and so he's trying to pick Democratic counties to throw out votes. He's trying to throw out votes of military who are serving overseas who did everything right. It's incredibly shameful. This is really a canary in the coal mine moment if they're able to succeed. I'm hopeful that they won't, but what they have done, is they have cost us millions of dollars in North Carolina fighting these for these lawsuits to preserve a win that we've already won. So it's one that you should be watching. It to me is unthinkable that we could lose. When I have talked to these voters, people who've literally done nothing wrong, they're going after really, they're going after the votes in a way that really doesn't make any real sense. These are people who have done everything right. 60,000 of them that they're targeting, but it's a big deal and one that. Everybody should be watching, especially if you care about fair maps like me, because in North Carolina, we're going to have another Supreme Court election in 26, and then 3 seats will be on the ballot in 28. That will be the difference likely in control of our state with fair maps for the next 2 decades. And for those of you who don't know why, just to tail onto the Supreme Court issue here, why this matters so much. I was one of 3 seats that were erased, through gerrymandering. My district, Jeff Jackson's, Kathy Manning's, those seats were gerrymandered away by Republicans in the legislature because they got a majority on the Supreme Court that became a rubber stamp for an extreme partisan legislature. And if those 3 seats, that mine included, were still in existence, we would send 7 Democrats and 7 Republicans to Washington in this last Congress. And that would mean that Hakeem Jeffries would be the Speaker of the House right now with 218 Democrats to 217 Republicans, literally changing the course of our nation's future because of gerrymandering. So for those who ask about judicial races, the ones in North Carolina, especially for the Supreme Court, are incredibly huge.
We've got another question on the Constitution. And as people are getting very scared of fascism taking hold here, but many of them don't know even where to start. And so how can we feed the broader public some good sound bites and information about what the Constitution means for them and how we're fighting to preserve it and do our work in ways that will improve the Constitution for all of us?
I start, I mean, everyone has their own approach, Jamie, but I just start with the person I'm talking to, and I say, literally, this is about you. Because if they can deport this guy and send him to a gulag, in El Salvador with no due process, literally just throw him on a plane and ignore the courts, they can do it to you too. That's what people should be especially upset about. There's a lot to be upset about, but that especially is just something we've never encountered before in our nation's history. A president willing to thumb his nose at the courts, and if he can do it here, he can continue doing it over and over. So I'm eternally optimistic. I'm someone who always hopes for the best, and but the way that we have seen and it has been shown over and over to push back on Trump is to make them pay, to make as much noise as we can on these issues, because when push comes to shove, we have seen Trump back down, and that's going to be something we're going to have to continue being very vigilant on over the next 4 years here.
Indeed. Any more, Jamie?
The chat's moving really fast.
No worries.
No.
So Wiley, what does back to your campaign, what does the next 6 months look like? Are you building infrastructure, hiring staff? Are you focused, I imagine, a little bit more on fundraising to get some dollars in the bank account?
Yeah, no, fundraising is always a big part of these campaigns. So you have the resources necessary to take on a powerful incumbent like Tom Tillis. So a lot of time there, but North Carolina is a large state. We say you campaign from Murphy to Manio. Those are the 2 most extreme parts of the state. So, I was in Manio last week doing an open chair town hall for the Republican member of Congress out there, answering questions. Traveling the state, incredibly important in a place like North Carolina. But building that infrastructure too. I'm somebody that really believes in field. I think turnout incredibly important. The work we do there, I think is I think it's it's more valuable than the TV ads and the rest. So getting the resources to build that amazing field operation to turn out the vote. Really important, because it's a simple equation. If we educate voters on the issues, they're going to be with us. If we educate them on what they need to do to get out there to vote, we're going to do much better. So I think that's for me a must in a state like North Carolina that President Obama won and was very close to winning a second time, but we've always been really close, and we're going to be really close this time with our Senate seat.
Yeah, here's a great question. So, Democrats, we probably won't get a super majority in the 26 elections. But what difference would it make if the Dems control the House and the Senate as far as resisting Trump?
I mean, it would be a sea change. We would have accountability. We would have the ability to stop so much of the damage that he's doing. I think the Senate is a tougher climb, just because we don't have all 100 seats up in this election. There's only a third of the Senate that's going to be in play. The House, though, every single seat is up. That's going to be important. But listen, for me, I'm the big things I want to do require the Senate. if we're ever going to get rid of partisan gerrymandering, we're going to have to do it passing a bill through the Senate. That's our best way forward. Moving a bill with 50 votes and the vice president breaking the tie, or 51 or more, and then passing it through the House. That for me, is the why for so much of what I do. Protecting women's reproductive health rights. We're not going to be able to change the opinion of this court, but if we pass a law that the president signs, we're able to protect women's rights in America. So, the Senate, for folks out there, we really need to focus on flipping seats, especially when we have vulnerable Republicans like Thom Tillis. If we can't flip the seat in North Carolina in 26 and then again in 28, the path for a Senate majority is very, very narrow. That's why I'm so excited about this race and sending a message by beating Thom Tillis.
I'm wondering, have the Democrats ever thought of doing up like a Project 2029? Of what that would look like if in 2028 we sweep all three branches and do our own blueprint.
I wish we were much more organized. The Republicans really showed a ton of vision, the wrong kind of vision, back in 2010 when they flipped all the state legislatures. One of the main people who writes about gerrymandering, a guy named David Daley, his book Rat Fucked, I hope I can say that on here, was one of the main works on the, talking about how they planned years and years in advance for the 2010 elections to flip these state legislatures, and then they were able to gerrymander, and we were in a much worse place. Right now, we have a 16-seat gerrymandering disadvantage nationally because of Republicans' ability to do that in these states, much more so than Democrats if you count up the districts. So, I'm someone who's always pushed for forward thinking, and we just don't see much of it in Washington. Usually, Jamie, I kind of end my speeches with the call to action, and it's usually, vote, volunteer, donate, do those things. But my call to action in this campaign isn't for the folks here, on Demcast that are showing up. It's for the elected officials who are not showing up. The Democrats who, we don't have our leverage, don't use it, and the Republicans who continue to fail to show up. It's an epidemic in North Carolina where they're not showing up for town halls because they can't answer the questions. But we got to demand so much more from our folks in elected leadership. Now is a time where if you are not, out there, on the floor of the Senate, for 26 hours, that was what Cory Booker did. That's what you need to do to meet this moment in America. And that's, again, why I'm so excited to get up every day and campaign like hell for this seat in our North Carolina, in the Senate here.
So what's the North Carolina Senate race version of Cory Booker's 26-hour filibuster?
Well, I've made the commitment. When I get to the Senate, I want to beat that record. So, in North Carolina, it's literally getting to every. We have 100 counties, getting to every corner of the state. That's what you got to do to win. In a state that it usually comes down to just thousands of votes. You can see with our Supreme Court race, just over 700 votes. And if you go back 4 years. Sherry Beasley, who was then our Chief Justice on the Supreme Court, lost by 400 votes. So it's one of those places where every county matters. Getting a little bit better in a red rural county, is the difference in these races.
So obviously here at Demcast, we are a national outfit, and we have people from all over the country. Most of the people on this call do not live in North Carolina. Obviously, we will do what we can to help boost your name and your values and your content on social media. Are there other things at this point in the election cycle that out-of-state folks can do to help you, progress through the campaign?
It's really just about uplifting our message, and I think we're just positioning, working incredibly hard to get to the point where you're going to look at the Senate races and you're only going to see a few that are really competitive, that are worth your time, your effort, and making the case that this is one, because we were always close in North Carolina, and the way that we were able to define Bo Hines because of the advocacy of DenCast, the work we did. This was my MAGA extreme Republican opponent, who, by the way, found a job with the Trump administration, his first job.
Of course he did.
And so being able to make this a national race, to bring people's attention to North Carolina, the social media engagement, the volunteers hours that generates, the fundraising that it generates, incredibly important. I'm always a big fan and try to engage as much as I can to answer questions, and we'll do that for folks who want to continue talking via social media after this. Just hashtag Demcast, and I'm happy to talk more. But that for me has always been really, really helpful and important.
Awesome. Well, we will definitely be sure to have you back as the race progresses. Let's touch base in a few months, and we can get some updates. And with that, and Jamie, unless there was any sort of final questions that we needed to hit.
One thing I've seen a lot of tonight is people asking for social medias of our elected Dems in particular. Anybody who has been around Demcast for a while knows I have a spreadsheet problem. And so that spreadsheet is almost done with every elected rep's, every social media platform they're on. That should be done in the next 4 or 5 days. I'm also listing any Dems that have already planning to run against some of these Republicans. So I will get that out. I think I'm on actually North Carolina right now. So I'm almost there, but it is time consuming. So it does take me a while to get that done. So
Jamie, our own personal ballotpedia. Thank you so much for doing that.
That resource doesn't exist. I want to see it.
Yeah, it doesn't. That's why I started doing them. And I also include phone numbers on there for elected reps along with their social media handles. So it's super easy to find a rep and, call them out or thank them. Because I think that's one thing right now we're not doing is, sure, when Cory Booker, but, like a rep like Lauren Underwood, who goes out to the April 5th protest, we're not thanking them for showing up. So we need to be giving them that positive reinforcement.
Absolutely.
That does so much more for folks, at least in Congress, than anybody out there can really understand. You serve in the state legislature, you serve in Congress, you get constituents who like to yell at you a lot. You get that a lot. But the ones who are willing to, you took a good vote on a bill you care about, but you expect it. But no, you should thank them for that too. Use that same passion that you have when you don't like something to say thanks. It really goes a long way.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Wiley, for joining us today. And thank you again to Rep Underwood and her team for joining us. It's a great call. Continued good luck on your race. We'll be watching.
Thanks so much.
All right. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you in a couple weeks.